My name is Vincent Nikkelen, and I'm Dutch, coming from the Netherlands. Worked 10 years in Hungary, and now about 10 years in Sweden. And I'll take that myself. I'm working for Verisure Securitas Direct, and in my career I'm more a project manager and system architect and a coach, very technically oriented. But what I always see is that people are, it's about technology, it's about bits, bytes, and I like to see the combination between how is an organization and technology connected. How do we get to architectures? How does it affect your organization? How does your organization affect your architecture, etc.? And one of the things I've been doing is, I was born there, little country, studied in Eindhoven, then worked for Ericsson in Hungary, and now in Lund, first at Ericsson in Lund and then in Malmö. And I worked with all these countries, and I had resources as a project manager there, worked with them from technology. And each country is completely different cultures, etc. But engineers are the same in one concept, is that one says we do it this way, and the other one says we do it that way. And even if the difference is this big, we can discuss that for weeks or months. And like we discussed just before, at the end we don't even know what we're solving anymore. But it looks technically really well. So I started to get a bit interested into what influences us in making decisions, what influences us into the position we're taking, and it became a little bit of a hobby. So what I would like to do today is talk a little bit about the different types of biases there are and how it affects technical things. Yeah? There's only one stupid question, is the question you don't ask, in my eyes. If I go too slow, let me know. If I go too fast, let me know. Yeah? I'll make sure that we stop when the pizza arrives. I think that's the good one. You're smiling, so. Anybody who wants to make this an interactive session? Nobody? Then you have bad luck. So, I'm not that smart. I just steal everything from Wikipedia or repeat other smart people, so that's important. But bias is a disproportionate weight in favor against a thing or a group. Yeah? And this is not something that you can measure, yeah, but it's based on soft values. And it's related to prejudices and intuition. And let us go first a bit on there. I'm not going to talk about this human type of bias. I'm not talking about gender bias, etc. later on. But it's important to understand where it comes from. And bias is a very natural thing, because I think by the time when we were still running around on hands and feet, before we had to decide very quickly in nature, what should we do now? Can we trust that thing? I mean, this dog needs to decide, is that cat a threat? Should I attack it? Am I going to win, or should I run away? These are split decisions you need to make. So nature has learned us to very quickly make decisions on trust levels. Fight or flight. And we still have that as humans. Everything that we are not familiar with, we are afraid of. Yeah? Different skin color, etc. And we see that in technical things as well. So bias is not something that we have learned ourselves. One of the big examples, I think that was in 98, 99. Do you know Susan Boyle? Yeah? Everybody has seen the video clip for the British Best blah blah blah. Yeah? Yeah? So she came there, and with fluffy hair, yeah, told herself that she was not good in learning, yeah, had a not too flattering dress, and so she was standing like that, so fun, yeah? Very self-confident woman said, I'm going to sing Ellen Page. And we all saw the reaction of the people, because everybody already made, based on the perception, oh, that's going to be a disaster. But then, when she opened her mouth, everybody was like, the biggest wake-up call, they called it. But not many people know, actually, that this is a very intelligent woman. Because she was told always that she was not good at learning. But she was briefly deprived of oxygen during her birth. Yeah? But in 2012 and 13, she actually has been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. And her IQ was estimated to be above average. So actually she surprises us twice. But we were biased on that one. And for me, these are very interesting things, because we don't want to be biased, but we are. So how does it affect us in a technical perspective, and what can we do? Just a little question, like, are you all working with IT, telecom, designers, testers, project managers? Yeah? Shortish? Yeah? So we're all working in a technical field. So one of the things is called anchoring. And let's start with an exercise. You're running your code in a hosted virtual environment, and your system starts to generate the following message: no space left on device. What could be the problem? This is where you guys come in now. I'll repeat your answer because I don't think that your answer will be picked up. What could be the problem here? Yeah, it is a bad user experience, but what is the technical problem behind this? What's the first thing that come up in mind?
Virtual machine has not much space.
So you mean a hard disk is full?
Yeah,
for the virtual machine. Okay, what would be your second guess?
application is consuming space.
Yeah? You see, I had this situation in one of my servers, one of my private servers. Spent 3 hours on that one. Allocated memory is not enough. I was even looking at the hosted virtual site, because maybe my virtual machine had enough, but there was nothing on the host left. I looked everywhere. I spent 3 hours because I was wrong. Yeah. It was actually not enough inodes. What are inodes? Inodes are actually descriptors that says you can make a new file on your system. It has nothing to do with space on the device. It's everything to do, you can create a new file. I spent hours searching for that because I was looking at hard drives. I was fooled. I'll explain later why this went wrong. Anchoring is the tendency for an individual to rely on an initial piece of information. Now go back to your answer. You talked about hosted environment. But that was the first piece of information you got. So immediately your answer was based on that first type of information. Yeah? Then I said no space left on the device. We talked about space. Space is memory. Yeah? So you took the first information what you got and you started to build your answer on that. That's a quite interesting thing. It's funny, we have now a UX expert here. Yeah? Now I went a bit too fast. Research has shown that when you tell people, you describe people, if I would say you're intelligent, industrious, impulsive, stubborn, and envious, then most people say is a positive person. If I would say the same to you, yeah, that you are envious, stubborn, impulsive, industrious, and intelligent, but I would tell you that in the other order, most people will answer that, that's not a nice guy actually. Huh? Just because the order in where I tell things Isn't that funny? That's how we are as people. We anchor on the first information that we get. So if you look at this one, no space left on device, and I highlighted space, versus cannot create file on device. Now this is a bit more precise, of course, but it's that first word that draws our attention. Is that something that you work with UX? Yes? So the order as well. So I'm not telling you anything new. See, then I get here proof that I'm, yeah? So, when you're working, then think about in which order do I present the information? I'm sitting at a meeting, or I write it down for an email, yeah? Do I start with the most important thing? Do I start with the least important thing? What do I start with? Now we learned if you start with the least important thing, that's what people will base their reaction on. Yeah? So you start with what you think is the most important that they grasp. If you have a multiple choice question, there's a lot of studies done here as well. You can ask pupils in school multiple choice questions. You can ask exactly the same question. You just change the wording of the question. And you will see there's a group of students that will then fail the question that would answer it right in the other way. When you create proposals in an email, in a maybe PowerPoint slide set, if they are very similar to each other, always start with the one that you propose, because that's what people pay the most attention to and that will get stuck. But when you have a difficult situation, there's a strategy where you say, let's talk about a design. Yeah, you make the first one very happy, flowers everywhere. Engineers don't like that. Yeah, so they will discard that one. Yeah, you show the second one, very boring, nothing new, and then you take the one that you want. But you have shown first two extremes, so you push them into the third one. Yes, that's not what I was meaning here on this one, but this is this bias. And when we go into meetings, think about how you present things. If I first thing say something that the other party doesn't like, if I say, just a second, if I say like, we're going to use a new programming language and people don't like that, the rest of the meeting is lost. Yeah, the other question? Yeah. It will happen that people don't even read the last one. Have you ever had a multiple choice with a lot of text to read, and then when you were halfway that you already knew the answer? It happens to me all the time. Yeah. So people stop reading, oh, I know the answer, and then read the answers before they have finished the text. So especially with students that are a bit nervous or not so experienced, hiding the relevant information in the last sentence is a disadvantage for them. If you would start with that, they probably would do it right. Multiple choice is actually the easiest test to make for teachers, but the hardest test to do it fair. It's not so much about the answering, it's much more about how you ask the question. Do you allow other people to complete their sentence? Who is sitting in meetings and somebody says something stupid and then, yeah? Or maybe you allow them to finish the sentence, but what happens in your head? Are you starting already to formulate how you respond on that? Do you do that? No? No? I do that. I do that. I don't think I know any engineer who doesn't do that. But I try to train myself not to do that. Not easy. I'm still considering the information presented. Am I still listening? Or I'm already, same principle I said before, I'm already finding information based on the first one. So anchoring is a very important one. You can use it and abuse it. Apophenia. That's one that engineers also quite often hit. What comes next? What is the next character that we have here? Come on! A dot? Ah, a big dot or... huh? What should be here on the dotted line? A 1. We do tests for this for children as well. Anybody put something else there? What would you put here on the dotted line? An I. Yeah? We skip one letter. At least we think we skip one letter. The answer I had in mind was actually this. Yeah? This is a random string. I just showed you the first 4 correct characters of it. And the missing letter was the P, because actually I want to talk about angiotensin converting enzyme gene polymorphism. I was lucky actually that that abbreviation existed. Yeah. So, apophenia is a tendency to perceive connections and meaning in unrelated things. Everybody has that. We're being trained as children to do that. You get these tests, what comes next, and they show you images, or you need to recognize patterns. I even did that test when I wanted to join my current company. It was called the intelligence test. Yeah, but in principle, it's guesswork. And there are about 5 or 6 underclasses, but 2 important for us is pareidolia. That's when you see things in random data, especially into images. And this, I think this is a Mars. Is this Mars or on? There's a Mars, yeah. So you have this, it looks like a face. Huh? Anybody would say this is a circle with 3 horizontal lines? Huh? Sorry? A plug? Yeah, could be. Yeah. Most people would say it's a face. Huh? And this, everybody would say it's an elephant. But the correct answer is, if you ask what is this, would be, oh, it's a rock in the sea. That's the correct answer. So we see things into random data. And it doesn't maybe sound very logical, but there's another thing called overfitting, where you want to be, it's a bit the opposite. Yeah? And overfitting is where you start to really go through separating here the red and the blue dots. Huh? And then something happens, and you get a sample that is out of there, and you have a problem. It's in principle the same. It's a bit counterintuitive. Yeah? But overfitting is a type of apophenia. And this happens a lot as well when we see things. Confirmation bias is a tendency to search or interpret in favor of certain things, or recall things. Like, I remember this way. I'm Dutch from origin, so in '72 we won the World Cup. And not Germany, by the way. That's how I remember it. And when I was 14, I made a very beautiful goal. And it's quite normal that we do that kind of things. But also when we listen to somebody talking with our background, we're interpreting it the way we like to hear it. If I would say like, if we would start talking about drinks, and you like cold drinks with alcohol, then you put that image in your mind. This is what we do a lot in meetings. Yeah? Do you recognize this? Do you do that? Yeah? Can you describe your behavior in such situations?
Sort of ignoring details,
You start to ignore things, yeah.
Focus on the things that you want to.
What is the result when that happens? What is the consequences of that?
Communication fails.
Your communication fails, absolutely. How? The devil is in... Yeah, that's what they say, the devil is in the details, yeah. But isn't it quite often that the devil is in the details because we haven't listened to the details? Or we have listened to the details but we had interpreted them differently? One of the things that I always force my team to do is, when you make an agreement, write it down on paper and email it to each other. I can give a very nice example of this. I worked at Ericsson in Lund, and we worked with a French organization. We had a meeting, and after the meeting we walked out, and I said to my manager, "Oof, now we have a problem." "What do you mean?" I said, "Yeah, did we make a decision?" She said, "No, we didn't make a decision." So, but call the French, they will tell you we made a decision. "Oh no." So she called the French and said, "Oh, but we made decisions," the French said. What had happened, the French had a proposal and the Swedes didn't like it, but the Swedes didn't object. Yeah? So the Swedes had something like, "Oh, this was a good meeting because they didn't push it. We didn't make a decision." They were listening for the decision-making part of the meeting. The French, they interpreted this meeting as we were waiting for the objecting part. There was no objection, so we agreed upon something. Yeah? So they both were on this confirmation bias. They were listening to what they wanted to hear. No objection or no agreement. We had another meeting there to clean up the situation because it turned out we spent an hour for nothing because we were not clear. So what can you do against it? I mean, you already mentioned it, documentation, devil is in the details. But is there something else we can do? Do you recognize this? Huh? The funny thing is, the more I've been working with this, the more I recognize. And the more I recognize where I do things wrong. It's so easy to find out where you do it wrong. It's really hard to prevent it. Summarize on your meetings. If you don't repeat maybe 5 to 10% of everything what is said in the meeting and the decision you make into the meeting, yeah, then you have this risk. So when you make a decision together, there's a discussion, there's a decision, how simple it is. Start with the words, "So we have decided that," and formulate it. You'll find out that quite often people will object to that. Still interesting, or are you just... This is another very interesting one. It's the first solution bias. And I'm very sensitive to that one myself. We tend to favorize our first solution to the problem. We work on something and we have the not invented here syndrome, so we fix something and then we have a solution and we work on that one. And then it doesn't work. And we need to correct the problem. And what do? Yeah, our mistakes are correcting. And then we try to fix that, so we patch it, then we patch it, then we patch it. Yeah? And it becomes a terrible design. It becomes a terrible thing. And the tip is, whenever you need to patch an architecture or a big piece of code or whatever, maybe a user interface that we have designed, yeah, or we're missing something, let's move everything a bit to the side and like there, and now in the middle we can put a little box there. Yeah. Every time think about that, take a step back and say, is it really better now? Because next time you discover something, you need to even squeeze more there. Yeah? And what we do as humans, we tend to think about how much cost, how much effort we had put into that. But I worked on this for 3 months. Or I worked on this for 2 days. You know? But these are sunk costs. Focus on how much effort and time you're going to put in the future. Can I maintain that new architecture while I have? Can I extend that architecture? Yeah? Especially in projects, you need to have this ready by the end of the month because it needs to go to the customers. Yeah? Project managers push for that, line managers, I guess you all know that situation. But then when you tell them, yeah, okay, fine, but the next feature will cost you twice as long time. Yeah? Then you get a bit of a balance. So forget to ignore what you have done, focus on what you're going to do. This is the most dangerous one. The normalcy or normality bias. I like this wiki statement, a belief people hold when facing a disaster. And a disaster it really is. We tend to underestimate the likelihood of something happened and the possible effects. Because we think that things will always function the way it went. Do you have some examples for this? Daily life examples, just so you place it somewhere.
I also worked at their example. They underestimated
They
Android.
underestimated Android. You worked on the R13 project. Yeah, with Hong. Yeah. But yeah, I'm more taking about something that goes well. At least we believe that it goes well here. Do you know people that drink a bottle of wine, step in the car, and when you talk to them, they say, "Yeah, but I always do that. It always goes okay." That is a disaster, actually. But they underestimate the likelihood that they get into an accident. Yeah? And they underestimate the effects. Cycling without a helmet, drive drinking, these are all things like that. One of the three main, and now I need a marker. It was planned this way. One of the things where you see this very much is in situations where you talk about system load, for example. Yeah, I worked once somewhere with a system load of 20%. Yeah. You release a little bit, it becomes 21, 22. Yeah. So what happens? You come to a situation where everything works normally, but you run over 50, 60%. And everybody's happy. But would you run any of your servers on 60% CPU load? Or memory usage? Never. Because if something happens, you won't recover. You don't even know if you have 40% left. But because every time you put 1% to it, you added 1%, you added 1%, it becomes very normal. 20%, well, 20 or 21, yeah, what is the difference? 60 or 61, what is the difference? Yeah? But before you know it, you enter the point where you really need to take actions. Unexpected behavior. Another one, recently worked with actually, showed us a number of open sessions that behave like that. But this was like less than 5% of the capacity what we had. So this is time. Yeah? So what we saw was that, yeah, there's some kind of a behavior in here. So what do you think that happened here? What happened here on this point of time where the number of sessions dropped? Absolutely, it wasn't a computer that rebooted. Actually, it was a server that the process we put in. We made a new release, loaded a new code there, and all the sessions they were being removed that were dangling around. And this was visible, but nobody worried about it because it had no negative consequences. So life was good. Then at a certain point of time, something else in the system was updated. And what happened now? They created a problem with the sessions. So the dangling sessions here that were not be released now started to behave like that. It was exactly the same. The problem was there, but it was normal. And we decided not to fix it. Or we didn't even talk about it. I didn't even know it existed. But then something else in the system went back and we didn't handle it correctly. That was the problem. But then that what went bad went even worse. What happens here? That was really people that were called in 2 or 3 in the morning and say, hey, there's a problem. We need to fix that. Now this was just a normal website, so it wasn't that crucial, but you understand. So what do? They restart the application, not restart the computer. I mean, we don't do restarting of servers. Restart the application, and before you know, you get this behavior. Because this was released once a month, and that's now a reboot every night. A restart of the application every night. And the thing is, what you happen is now that people start to say like, yeah, but we did something. No, the problem was already here. But we ignored it. It became normal. Now, if our traffic would have increased with 4-fold, we would have a problem as well. But I think we would have just put in a new server. These kind of things we see all the time, everywhere. And there is no organization that fixes this kind of problems. Because is it worth to put money? If you see this, is it worth to put money in that? I don't even bring it up to my manager. Because there are more important things to do. New features, new things, new that. House cleaning is not important. Technical debt. This is technical debt that we are dragging with us. But it hits us at a certain point. Unexpected. And we started to... If this happened the first time, you might discuss it. How many of you have this list of known problems? Yes. All the hands go up. You're not even allowed to talk about them. And whenever they appear, we just ignore that. Even though maybe the problem was a little bit different. There's one thing in my Ericsson time what I learned was that every problem that seemed to be the same should be treated as 2 separate problems. I worked on a high availability platform, 5 nines. We logged them separately in that time. Non-determinism. Who of you have issues that you can't reproduce? Same problem. It happens. And we call it non-determinism. And we say like, yeah, but this is impossible to find, or we cannot fix it, or and then we go on. But non-determinism in our world, it shouldn't exist. Unless you work with quantum computers or that kind of things, or your system is really based on random input. But normally we don't have that. So there is somewhere a mistake there. But as long as this non-determinism doesn't cause a situation, that means your CEO is being called, or his salary or his bonus system is affected, it's being accepted. So normalcy bias is, in my eyes, the most dangerous and the most expensive and the hardest problem to tackle, both from a management perspective and from a technical perspective. Often quite expensive to do, but more expensive to fix later. So what is important, I think, to remember? Bias is a natural thing. We do it every time. In every meeting we have, every technical decision that we're having. Try to be aware of it during the meetings and discussions. I just picked 5 now, but I think there are about 10, 15 different biases. And we have them every day, so try to be aware of it. You don't have to act on it, but just recognize it. Yeah? Try to understand why somebody has a certain opinion or a certain belief. I work a lot with Spain now, and one of the tasks I got was not only to understand the northern architecture of our security networks, but also the southern architecture. That was the best thing that I could do. Because now I'm sitting in a meeting, I'm listening both at what are they saying, but also try to understand why are they saying. Why is this a problem for them? I'm not thinking about why it's a problem for me, but I'm thinking why it's a problem for them. Try to understand their reasoning, short and long term. And when in a meeting you bring it up and say, hey, are you saying this because? You'll find yourself that you really speed up your discussions. And always try to make it a habit to find the bias behind what we're doing. And like I said, I started doing this I think about 6 months ago, and it's helped me a lot. I became less frustrated during meetings because I understood my partners. I would almost say opponents, because quite often technical discussions are fights, yeah, because you stand for your beliefs. But I became much more relaxed. I got much better results into the meetings, and we had much better atmosphere in there. That's all I wanted to say, because I think I get really boring if I add 5 more of the biases. No, you think? Should I have no clue about the time, by the way. But anything you would like to share? Any experience you?
Would you say that it's bad that you're so biased?
The question is it bad that we are biased? So no, I think it's human. It's normal. I mean, we shouldn't be ashamed of it, but I think that we can be better if we be aware of it. But we're biased every day. I mean, if you go to the forest and there's a wild hawk running towards you, you need to make that split-second decision. When I walk with my children and there's a dog looking angry, I need to make the split-second decision. Is he going to bite or not? Huh? That's a natural reaction. But it maybe should not belong that much into technical things, but it's very natural. We do it every day. Then thank you very much for your attention. Thanks.